let's get into chapter 11. I think we're staying at Lake Anna. I think that Hurley realizing that Mitch beating him is a huge problem doesn't do well for Hurley's ego. But I don't really have much to say about the last chapter. It was pretty straightforward, so I'm just going to truck along. Oh, okay. Chapter 11. The first night didn't go so well, at least as far as sleep was concerned. Victor had kept all of them up telling outrageous stories of his sexual conquests. I don't like Victor. I want to know his real name so I can say I don't like this guy. Do we ever find out Victor's real name? Because I want to know. Each one more graphic and bizarre than the already twisted story he'd just finished. After an hour or so, he ran out of steam and called them all a bunch of maggots for not reciprocating. Victor then proceeded to launch into a symphony of unabated flatulence for a quarter of an hour before eventually falling into a deep snorting slumber. Who is this guy? Who does he think he is? Rat placed his pillow over his head and tried to block out the noise, but it didn't work. It was in those much-needed, sleepless hours just after midnight that Rat began to explore the idea of getting rid of Victor. At first he considered getting up and throttling the idiot right then and there, but knew it would only result in further punishment from the instructors and disdain from his fellow recruits. Still, the thought of spending the next 6 months with the lout was something that presented a very real problem. A guy like Victor could easily drag someone down with him, and Rapp had an undeniable feeling that the two men were on a collision course, and not one of those collisions that could be avoided if one of or both of them changed their behavior. It was inevitable. You're gonna kick his ass. Mitch, you better kick Victor's ass. I swear to God. Ah, bright light. It was the kind you needed to brace yourself for. Either drop your hips, lower your shoulders, and make the other guy feel more pain than you, or he would do the same to you and you were toast. There was something undeniably odd about the man. The idea of his participating in a covert op was preposterous. If he could ever walk among the enemy undetected, it would be a miracle. My thoughts exactly. Rapp wanted this new vocation with every fiber of his body, although he was smart enough to know that saying he would never quit and actually never quitting were two very different things. He also knew he would be tested in ways he'd never imagined. He'd be pushed to the full extent of his physical and mental abilities, and it was likely that at some point, when he was really in the hurt bag, that pang of doubt would creep into his mind. Could Victor create a climate in which, at his lowest point, he might consider quitting? Rapp didn't want to find out. Somewhere in the middle of the night, as he was lying on his back watching bats dart around the rafters of the barn and listening to a snorting Victor, Rapp decided the moron would need to quit, and if he didn't do it on his own and do it quickly, Rapp would have to find a way to suddenly nudge him in the right direction. That's either the best idea ever or the worst idea ever, and you're going to end up worse for wear. They were up before the sun. 2 of the instructors came in and cursed, yanked, kicked, and slapped them out of bed. Luckily for Rapp, he was half awake and heard the door open. His feet were on the floor before the DI could dump him out of his cot. He'd guessed this was how the morning would start, but the yelling was nonetheless unsettling. In between the barking and smacking, Rapp tried to make out exactly what it was that he was supposed to do. Somewhere in the middle of it, he heard the words line and PT. He threw on his workout gear and running shoes and was out the door like a shot. The lawn was covered with a thick morning dew, and the sun was only a gray veil in the east. They weren't allowed watches, and there were no clocks in the barn, so Rapp guessed that it was somewhere in the vicinity of 5 a.m. How do you don't allow them to know what time it is? Is that what I'm hearing? Because that's kind of messed up. The air temp had to be in the mid-70s, and the humidity was pasty. It would be another hot one. 70 degrees in the morning? Ew. What? As Rapp came to a stop on the line, he was aware that he was the first and only one out the door. That's either good or bad. He figured to start with, there were certain things where it was smart to be first, and others where it wasn't. Getting out of bed and getting on the line was an area to be first. Hand-to-hand combat and fighting drills he would never hold back on, but the endurance stuff like running and PT he would. He needed to stay healthy and hold some things in reserve. These guys didn't need to know he could run like the wind. As he waited for the others, he caught a whiff of coffee and turned to look at the house. There, standing on the porch, was a new face, a blonde-haired guy who looked to be in his mid-30s. The man was staring intently at Rapp. Rapp returned the stare, and even at a distance of several hundred feet, noted the blue eyes. Like mine. That was creepy, I'm sorry. The guy was in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. Well, I don't have it. He was leaning against one of the porch columns, sipping his coffee, and making no effort to conceal his interest in Rapp. There was something different about the guy. Rapp could tell he was in shape, but he was way more relaxed than the other DIs who were marching around and that sadistic little cuss who tried to neuter him. He's talking about Hurley. I'm sorry, that's really funny. One by one, the guys trickled out of the barn and fell in. Victor was last, which was becoming a common theme. Sergeant Smith was walking quickly beside him, giving him an earful in a hushed voice. They'd all been warned that there would be no yelling on the line. This wasn't the only place on the lake, and voices carried across the water. Inside the barn with the door closed, however, the decibel level went through the roof. Victor fell in at the far end from Rapp. Sergeant Smith stepped out in front of the 7 recruits and with a clenched jaw said, "You puds better get your shit together. I'm gonna start knocking some heads. I've seen Cub Scouts do better than this. This is damn sloppy. It shouldn't. Me reading is damn sloppy. It shouldn't never take you morons more than 60 seconds to get your ass out of bed, dressed and on the line. When you go to bed, make sure your shit is ready. You lay it out on your footlocker so it's ready to go. We start PT at 5 every morning." Rapp watched the DI's eyes shift to the opposite end of the line. He leaned forward and saw Victor had his arm raised. "Sarge, when are we supposed to take a piss? I gotta go so bad I'm about to drown." "Bro." Sergeant Smith walked over to Victor and got in his face. "Maybe if you hadn't gotten your lazy ass out of bed when I told you to, you would have had time to piss." He stepped back and looked down the line. "We're going to do a quick warm-up. As much as I hate you idiots, the powers that be don't want you ladies getting hurt until they see if you've got some potential. I've tried to dissuade them, as you are the biggest collection of shit lickers I've seen come through here in some time. Sarge, I gotta go really bad." Victor whined. "Then piss yourself, you big idiot." His head snapped to the group. "If you can't take care of your business and get out here in 60 seconds, I'm gonna have to treat you like a bunch of toddlers. So go ahead and piss yourself, Victor. The rest of you who need to go, I suggest you wait until we head out for our run. You can pull over on the trail and take care of your business. Now drop and give me 50, and if I see any of you pussies cheating, we'll start over." They did the 50 push-ups, followed by 100 sit-ups, 50 up-downs, and then a few minutes of scissor kicks and a couple of stretches. Jesus Christ. I would faint after 10 push-ups. And then Sergeant Smith led them into the woods, 8 of them in a nice neat line with Victor trailing. Rapp guessed they were moving at just under a 6-minute pace. He could keep a 5-minute pace for 10 miles, so he was feeling good. They finished the 5-mile run and found themselves standing in front of an obstacle course in the middle of the woods. The place looked like a relic from an abandoned Renaissance festival. Sergeant Smith had his stopwatch out and was clocking them. Rapp positioned himself 5th in line, carefully placing one man between himself and Victor. He wanted to see how these other four guys navigated the course, guessing that they'd all done it when they'd gone through boot camp. His idea kind of fell apart when Sergeant Smith started sending guys at 30-second intervals. The course started with a low wall. It was a 10-foot tall wooden moss-laden wall with 2 telephone poles stuck in the ground in front of it. The first telephone pole stuck out of the ground about 1.5 feet and was 4 feet in front of the wall. The next telephone pole was 2 feet in front of the wall and stuck out of the ground 3 feet. Rapp watched as the first recruit headed for the wall, picking up speed. Right before the telephone poles, he did a quick stutter step, and then, as nimbly as you could imagine, he placed his left foot on the first of the shorter and shorter telephone pole, using it as a step. His right foot then landed on the second telephone pole, and he launched himself up and onto the wall. Grabbing the top with both hands and pinning his knee to the wall just a few feet from the top, it was like a controlled collision. The recruit was up and over, dropping to the soft ground on the other side. The second guy did it the same way, and the third tried something slightly different that involved doing a pull-up. After the low wall was a 40-foot dash to a 15-foot high wall with ropes hanging on the face. There was nothing fancy about this one. You just grabbed the rope, put your feet on the wall, and walked your way up. Next in line was barbed wire. Again, pretty straightforward. Dive under, keep your butt down, and do an infantry call to the other end. After that was a 40-foot cargo net strung between 2 towering pines. Beyond that was a set of logs set up in a zigzag pattern, about 3 feet off the ground. They acted as a sort of footbridge to test your balance. Rapp didn't have a chance to see what came after the balance logs because it was his turn to start. He quickly dried his palms on his hands, the palms of his hands on his shorts, and then when Sergeant Smith gave him the signal, he ran toward the short wall, mimicked the exact steps of the first recruit, and flew himself up and out at the top of the wall. He caught it, pulled himself up and over, and landed with ease on the other side. The second taller wall was easy enough to navigate, and the barbed wire was about as primal as it got. If a guy couldn't grasp the simplicity of crawling, he should just quit and go home. The cargo net proved to be the first real challenge. About a third of the way up, Rapp realized there was too much slack in the middle, so he moved over to the side. After that, it was easier. The balance logs were a breeze, the tires were nothing, the transfer ropes were playground 101. Then he came across something that looked like a set of uneven parallel bars, like the kind female gymnasts used. He paused, not sure how to attack the 2 horizontal telephone poles, and then almost on cue, one of the DIs was right there barking orders at him, telling him what to do and to do it quickly. Based on what the DI was telling him, it sounded like a great way to break a rib, but Rapp could see no other way, so he launched himself into the first pole and then the second, and then it was more tires and the thing called the Burma Bridge. After that, there were more logs, ropes, and walls to negotiate, and a sprint to the finish. When Rapp crossed the line, Sergeant Smith was staring at a stopwatch and shaking his head. He glanced at Rapp, contempt on his face, and said, "You suck." Rapp was doubled over with his hands on his knees, acting more tired than he was. He wanted to smile, but didn't. He couldn't have done that badly. The guy in the number 6 position had yet to finish. Rapp turned to see how the last two were doing. At the edge of the course, about 50 yards back, he saw the blonde-haired guy he'd seen on the porch earlier in the morning. The man was standing at the edge of the woods, staring straight at him, again making no effort to conceal his interest. Okay, so basically a big old obstacle course, which, par for the course. I hate Victor, obviously. I'm going to go ahead and, let's see, can I read a second chapter this time? Yeah, I think I can. So, not much to go on, not much to say after that chapter, other than they deserve watches, number one, or at least a way to tell what time it is. Also, who doesn't get up and immediately have to go to the bathroom? That's so unfair. Like, come on, dude. In that, Victor was right. Victor should have been allowed to use the bathroom, but I still don't like him. Okay, so I'm going to do this quickly. Chapter 12, Langley, Virginia. Okay, different place. Kennedy parked in the east lot and entered the headquarters building at exactly 8:03. She'd used the hour-and-a-half drive up from Lake Anna to try to prioritize her ever-increasing list of responsibilities, both official and unofficial. Much of her job was off the books, and that meant no notes and no files. She had to keep it all organized in her own mind, and every time she came back to HQ, she needed to have her story straight. Sorry. When the elevator doors parted on the 6th floor, one of her bosses was waiting with a deeply concerned look on his face. Max Powers, the most boss name I've ever heard in my life. Max Powers nudged her back into the elevator and said, "Problem?" Powers was the Near East Division Chief. It had taken Kennedy a while to get used to his style. Powers was famous for speaking in one-word sentences. I already like him. His colleagues who had worked with him over the years called him Musket Max. Kennedy stepped back and asked, "What's wrong?" Her immediate fear, as it was almost every time she entered the building, was that her Black Ops program had been uncovered. "Beirut," Powers said, offering nothing more. Beirut could mean a lot of things, but on this hot August morning, Kennedy was aware of one thing in particular. John? Yep. Crap. Kennedy fumbled under her breath. John Cummins was one of their deep cover operatives who had snuck into Lebanon 3 days earlier. An American businessman who worked for a data storage company had been kidnapped the previous week. Okay, so it is just some random new guy. Present. Okay. Good to know. This company, it turned out, was run by a Texan with big contacts in D.C. The owner was old school, former Army, and over the past 30 years, he had freely and enthusiastically kept the CIA and the Pentagon abreast of all the info he and his people happened to pick up in their international dealings. A lot of very important people in town owed him, and he decided now was the best time to call in a few of his IOUs. The Pentagon had 0 assets in the region, and the CIA wasn't much better. They were still trying to recover from the kidnapping, torture, and death of their Beirut station chief half a decade earlier. Langley did, however, have assets in Jordan, Syria, and Israel. Cummins, who had lived in Syria for the past 3 years, was the best bet. He'd built up some great contacts by passing himself off as a counterfeiter of U.S. currency and smuggler of American-made goods that were embargoed in the region. Don't know why that word stumped me, I'm sorry. From the jump, Kennedy argued against using him. He was by far their most valuable asset inside Syria and Beirut, although safer than it had been in the 80s, was still pretty much the Wild West of the Middle East. That makes sense. If anything went wrong, Cummins would be lost. Someone with a much bigger title had overruled her, however. How bad? Kennedy asked. Bad. The doors opened on the 7th floor, and Kennedy followed Powers down the hall of the office of Thomas Steinsfeld. Thomas Steinsfeld. That's the last name. I'm an idiot. I freaking swear to God. Frick! Okay, listen. Just... Shh. Humans make mistakes, okay? I see Tom, and I'm like, oh, Thomas, right? And they actually call him Thomas Lewis. So, of course, I'm gonna be like, oh, wasn't there another Thomas? I blame Vince Flynn. Okay, I'm sorry. Moving on. Down the hall to the office of Thomas Stansfield, the Deputy Director of Operations. The door was open, and the two of them breezed through the outer office, past Stansfield's assistant, and into the main office. Powers closed the soundproof door. Kennedy looked at the silver-haired Stansfield, who was sitting behind his massive desk, his glasses in one hand and the phone in the other. Stansfield was probably the most respected and feared man in the building, and possibly the entire town. Since they were on the same team, Kennedy respected, but did not fear the old spy. Stansfield cut the person on the other end off, said goodbye, and placed the phone back in its cradle. Looking up at Powers, he asked, "Any further word?" Powers shook his head. "How did it happen?" Kennedy asked. "He was leaving his hotel on Rue Monot for a lunch meeting," Stansfield said. "He never showed. He missed his check-in this afternoon, and I placed a call to my opposite in Israel. Mossad did some quiet checking." Stansfield shook his head. "A shopkeeper saw someone fitting Cummins' description being forced into the trunk of a car shortly before noon today." Kennedy felt her stomach twist into a wrenching knot. She liked Cummins. They knew all too well how this would play out. The torture would have commenced almost immediately, and depending on how Cummins held up, death was the likely outcome. "I remember you voiced your opposition to this," Stansfield said. "But no, there are certain things that even I wasn't told." "Such as?" The ops boss shook his head, letting her know he wasn't allowed to talk about it. "The important thing now is that Schnoz's Syrian contacts back his cover story. If they don't step up to the plate for him, this will end badly. Cummins was half American and half Jewish, and had a nose to make a Roman emperor jealous. Hence his unofficial cover name was Schnoz." That is amazing. "Double down," Powers chimed in. "Get the Texas boy on a plane with a couple suitcases filled with cash. It's a possibility that I already floated with the White House. They're getting nervous, though, and for good reason." "They should be," Kennedy said. "They just burned one of our most valuable assets trying to do a personal favor that, as far as I can tell, has nothing to do with national security." "Bingo," Powers said. Stansfield was quiet for a moment. "I have a back channel I can use with the CEO. He wants this employee back, and I think when I explain to him what happened to our man, he'll offer to pay for both. It should help cement the idea that Schnoz was working as a freelancer." Okay, wait, so... Okay, so Cummins is the one who was tortured, and his nickname is Schnoz. Okay, got it. Sorry, I did get that straight in my mind. It better happen quick, Kennedy said. We never know how long someone will be able to hold out. If they break Schnoz... She stopped talking and shuddered at the thought of the damage that will be done. I know, Stansfield sighed. Rescue op? Powers asked. Stansfield looked slightly embarrassed. Not going to happen. We knew it going in. Beirut is still radioactive. What if we get some good intel? Kennedy asked. That's a big what if. But what if we do? Kennedy pressed her point. We need assets in that place. We need assets in place. Stansfield sadly shook his head. Corner office or 1600? Powers asked. Kennedy understood the shorthand question to mean, was it the director of the CIA who was freezing them out, or the White House? White House, Stansfield replied. I didn't understand that question. Our friends at the Institute, Powers offered it as a suggestion. They're in the loop? Stansfield tapped the leather ink blotter on his desk while he considered the Israeli option. The Institute was the slang Powers used to refer to the Institute for Intelligence, or as they were better known, Mossad. I'm told they knew before we did. Maybe let them handle the cowboy stuff if it comes to that. The fact that it had not occurred to him to have Mossad handle the rescue spoke volumes about the complicated relationship. If something concrete comes our way, I'll consider it, but... You don't want to owe them the farm, Powers said. That's right. But you don't want to owe them the farm, Powers said. That's right. They would more than likely demand something that I'm either unwilling or unable to give them. May I say something, sir? Kennedy asked. Stansfield wasn't sure he wanted to hear it, but he knew he needed to let his people vent. He nodded. This problem is never going to go away until we send these guys a very serious message. I assume you mean the kidnapping. Yes. I told the director the same thing 5 minutes before you walked in the door, but it seems we lack the political will at the moment to take a more aggressive approach. Pussies. Powers muttered, and then looked at Kennedy and said, Sorry. No need to apologize, she said. She paused and then decided this was the right time to push her agenda. You know what this means? No. It's yet another example of why we need to get Orion up and running. How in the hell can we expect our assets to operate in this environment? It's bad enough that we won't get tough with these guys. It's inexcusable that we won't even consider a rescue op. He's one of our own, for Christ's sake. Stansfield was not surprised that she'd brought it up. He would have done the same thing if he was in her place. But during a crisis like this, it was a common mistake to hurry things that needed time. I want this to happen as badly as you do, Irene, but it can't be rushed. If we send a bunch of half-baked assets into the field, we'll end up spending all our energy trying to pull them out of the fire. Trust me, I saw it firsthand back in Berlin. Just try to be patient for a few more months. If a couple of these guys can prove that they have the stuff, I'll greenlight it and support you every step of the way. Kennedy took it as a promise, but couldn't get her mind off Cummins and what he was enduring. Her thoughts, for some unknown reason, turned to Rapp. She hoped he was the one, the weapon they could turn loose on these murderous zealots. Okay, so... Two things. Number one, I'm an idiot. I saw the name Tom and was like, oh, that's Thomas, her boss, right? No. I'm an idiot. That's what that was. Number two, my theories were all just confirmed. We're all, like, I threw them out the window because it's Cummins, or Schnoz, who's being tortured and is probably gonna die. He's probably already dead. So there's that. But I'm gonna go take a break and get something to eat because I'm starving. And this video is longer than I thought it would be, so see you guys in the next one.